Max Rowell, Melbourne Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
This is Nat Fyfe from the Fremantle Footy Club.
Trent Cotchin from the Richmond Footy Club.
Scott Pendlebury from the Collingwood Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Patrick Cooch from the Carlton Footy Club.
It's Rory Sloane here from the Adelaide Crows.
This is Tom Mitchell from the Hawthorn Footy Club, and you're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Hey friends, you got MJ. Welcome back to another episode of the 50 Most Relevant here at the Coaches Panel. We're giving you 50 podcasts and 50 articles every day of the first 50 days of the year to help really kickstart your preseason for SuperCoach, DreamTeam, AFL Fantasy, and Ultimate Footy. Today, a real fascinating player that's had a lot of hype over the last two preseasons, but it's dulled a little bit in 2022, and maybe understandably so. Matt Rowell is who we're talking about, and on this episode, I've got Kane back. Hello, mate. How are you?
Very well, MJ. Yeah, it seems like probably for the first time since he was on an AFL list that there's not really as much buzz. I think we'll get into the price that makes him extremely relevant, but I think a lot of that hype has sort of died down. There's a lot of pressure off of him at the moment, which will probably be quite a relief when you think about what happened last year with Tuke Miller, with Anderson rising up, with some of the moves they've made. It seems like for the first time in his career, there's not really much of an expectation on him on a public sense. Obviously, internally, they'll be relying on him heavily if they want to make their first finals appearance. But I think it leaves him in a really intriguing spot.
Yeah, and for fantasy coaches, it's fascinating to watch a player be so hotly anticipated and believed in, see that come to fruition, and then for the better part of the last dozen games, him be incredibly underwhelming. Now, there's reasons for that, and we'll get into that in a second, but still, he's only just the 20 years of age. His best scores last year were not great. It was a 73 in AFL Fantasy against Brisbane and an 84 in SuperCoach against Melbourne. If you want to look at what he's done from a career perspective, of course, it comes from one of those first four games of 2020 when he just absolutely dominated from the get-go. His top ever SuperCoach score is a 171 against the West Coast Eagles, while in that same game, an unadjusted 108. That is closer towards the 130 territories in pure, if you're wanting to do the multiplication of 1.25, but just even in a pure sense, where he's priced at for us. The fact that he's got some career tons in there is really promising. He is priced very nicely. He's got an average of 55.2 last year and 63 in SuperCoach. And in that format, he's going to cost less than $350K. In AFL Fantasy and DreamTeam, priced very similarly. $464,000 in AFL Fantasy and just a touch over $470K. And this time last year, Kane, I think we might have been on the episode when Matt Rowell was in the 50 most relevant. He's been in it every year since he's been on an AFL list. He was in the 40s in his debut year, up in the high teens last year, regressing back into now where he does find himself at number 29 in the 50 most relevant. But pretty much if you're on Matt Rowell at any point in time last year, probably through no fault of his own, it wasn't a fun experience in salary caps or in drafts.
Yeah, well, I think it's pretty simple, MJ. Unfortunately, he got injured again. He got injured in round one, early in the game, missed a lot of footy. And to be honest, when you not just look at him, and this is something I think a lot of people need to think about, it is extremely hard to catch back up from an in-season injury that is extended like it was for him. It was over 3 months of footy that he missed.
A long time.
So you read about those numbers. They are, below what expectation was for someone of his caliber. Think about this guy as well who came back after he missed a large chunk of the season. Dylan Shield, a guy that's nearly got a decade in the league, been a 100 guy. He came back after a layoff. He averaged 62 in DT, 67. Like, you think about a Josh Dunkley.
Dunkley would almost feel very comparable. Maybe he's a little bit higher with some tackle count and some other elements there. But...
Well, and think about the side he's playing in, MJ. But
true.
My point is, he came back, and in his 5 games in the home and away season, he averaged 63 and a 71.
Yeah.
So my point is, it is so difficult when you suffer a long-term injury and you are limited in your training to come back in the season and produce anything.
Yeah.
It is
that's true.
extremely hard. So it's not just a Matt Rowell problem.
No.
But those are two guys that are proven elite scorers who are much older, have much more experience at AFL level, have played way more games, and they're elite scorers, and they're going in the 60s as well. So I'm wiping that slate fully off my books.
I think you have to. Last year, you go, like you had one game of 20 plus possessions. He didn't even have much of a preseason prior to that injury anyway. So for me, I go, I'm prepared to give him the benefit of the doubt. For some, that might be too much,
MJ.
but
Yeah,
there's way too much information to go, oh, he's not the premium we once thought he could be. He's not the fantasy prospect we thought he could be. Absolutely not true. Remind ourselves of what he can be, not just in a hypothetical forecast, but can be in what he has done. In the first 4 rounds of 2020, remember, these are shortened games. This is what a first 4 game player is delivering. 18 possessions per game, 5 tackles, 4 clearances, 4 score involvements, 2 rebound 50s, 2 inside 50s, and a score build that showed he is not just the one-dimensional contested ball winner and can't do anything else. That year before that injury that impacted him in 2020 with that shoulder injury, scores, again, unadjusted in AFL Fantasy and Dream Team of 64, 108, 104, and 78. 80 was the 100 of 2020. So he is, if you want to play the adjusted average game, fine. He's basically just shy of a 90 in that format in 4 games. While in SuperCoach, 72, 172, 141, and 114, that average of 100 prior to that shoulder injury. The reason we go back to this is it is reflective of what he showed as dominance across his junior years, Kane, in that under 18 championships in 2019, 25 disposals, 12 contested. In the NAB League, when he played for the Oakley Chargers, he averaged 32 possessions, 17 of them contested, 8 tackles, 4 marks, and an average of 171 in SuperCoach and 123 in Dream Team and Fantasy. And so the question isn't, can Rowell score? The question is, are we finally going to let him see his body allow him to do what he's done as a junior and in a small bite-sized cherry moment of the AFL? Because if his body's going to allow him to, it feels like a no-brainer pick in a few different formats this year.
Yeah, and again, just to backtrack to 2020, MJ, that 4-round average was 89 unadjusted. It's up to 110 in those first 4 games.
Yeah, wow.
And it's up to 125 before that, because you got to take out that injury game.
That's true.
In
Geelong. It was
Geelong.
88 with the injury game. Yeah.
Now we know just how hard it is to produce a ton in your first season.
True.
Again, this guy didn't produce tons, MJ. He collected 9 Brownlow votes from round 2 to round 4, and they won all 3 of those games. So
right.
Now that's a very small sample size, and at the price, the expectation doesn't have to be anywhere near that. I think if you get 80 plus in both formats, he's probably done his job in your side. And I think that's about where the line should be. The thing that impresses me last year in those games he did play, the tackle count is still very solid for a guy that's not in great shape. You know, he's got a 9 tackle game, a 7 tackle game, 2 6 tackle games. The contested possessions, 13, 12, 10, couple 9 games. The only game that he played, when he played the whole game, his lowest contested possession count was 6.
Yeah.
Like, that is really, really high, MJ. Like, there's a lot of guys in their first couple of years, that's the area they struggle. For Rowell, that's a strength. So you got to think, when he develops that tank, when he can find those pockets for the easier possessions, that's when his score is really going to explode. So for me, he's a safe person to have in your all starting squads across all formats at the moment. The price is fine. If these cows emerge, maybe structurally you'll have to go somewhere else because, you're getting some greater value and you can do a few more things with your team. But I think at this point, he's just a person you have in your lineup. You just leave him there, and in time you'll have more information and you can either hold, go up or go down. It's a very flexible position to have Rowell.
Yeah.
I think where the interesting part, MJ, is how people judge him in a single season draft.
And keepers, yeah.
We probably have to touch on keepers, but single season, if we're going with your classic 10 team, 7 mids.
Yeah, sure.
I think people are going to be thinking, people are going to be drafting with about a 75, 80 in mind.
Yeah.
I think if you've got him at that range, roll him up around, because I think you've got
the upside
potential to get 85, 90, which would take him from, an M5 to maybe, pushing M4 type of range. I think you've got to go with that upside. But again, I think a lot of people will just wait really late and as a result, probably not get him, because I don't think there is, a burn factor to say. I think 90.
No, not at that range. No.
I think 90 is about as much as you can really hope for. I think beyond that, you're probably pushing your luck.
Yeah, the burn probably kicks if you're drafting him at an M3 range, expecting that start of 2020 to be normative, and he doesn't do that, that's where the burn hits. But if you're picking him at M6, M7,
yeah, we know.
There's
we know
no
you get down to you get down to 70 type of high 70 type of guys at M7. So I think roll him up around. He's probably, as I said, M4, M5 at best. I think if you can find a sweet spot, but at the same time, MJ, if there's another guy you think, he's probably going up against your Lipinskis and these type of guys that have a bit of buzz at the moment. So I don't think he's a real hurt factor this year or a win factor this year. Now, clearly where it gets really tricky is a keeper, because his best years are clearly ahead of him.
Yes, no doubt.
He's a number 1 pick. He's got more Brownlow votes in his games that he has played than a lot of good AFL players.
It's true.
And I still think he is the key piece, along probably with Ben King, for the Suns going forward. Put Anderson in there as well. We know Miller's still got plenty of good footy, but that sort of trio of King, Anderson and Rowell, that's sort of that core that if you're going to be pushing for not only their first finals, but a first flag, you can start seeing if you got 2 gun mids and a gun forward, you're on your way, you're building.
Yeah.
Now, where you feel like the risk sits when you can pick him, I think that's the really interesting part. I think if you're taking Rowell, again, you're going to have to build your team that you want to be peaking in. Probably, in all honesty, you're going to have to be patient. I think you're going to have to be thinking you're in the mix from maybe 2025 onwards.
Yeah.
So again, in the first round, he's probably in that range, MJ, where I think to pick 25 is probably the earliest I could see him going.
Yeah. I
think you're turning down a lot that's in that similar bracket. Maybe even his teammate is going to have to beat out Noah Anderson.
Yeah.
But I think if he's around 50 plus, and you can target a strategy where you are happy to be patient. And to be honest, I think patient is a good approach in keepers. With the chaos we've got with COVID, you'd hate to be in a flag push
window this year.
And lose, just say you got an Aaron Hall, a Zorko, these type of guys that might only have a couple of years left, and you lose them at a key time.
Yeah.
So I think if you can sort of structure it around, and maybe you take a Will Day, a Hayden Young, a Walsh, an Anderson, a Sorong, if you can time that and have a group that you think
emerge
in a couple
together.
of years, just grow together. So I think if he gets past 50, you start feeling like, this is a guy that I can see the growth. Now, will he be a 110 guy? Hard to know. He might be a Judd guy where he is a lot of contested footy. Maybe he doesn't develop that outside game. But I think at the very worst, you're going to get 5-6 seasons of 95 plus.
Yeah.
Again, is he going to be an absolute fantasy pig and be 115 plus?
We don't know. Maybe.
We don't know. But I think at that point in the draft, MJ, if you've done enough keepers, once you get outside the first sort of 40, 50 picks, there's a lot of much for muchness when you take away those 28, 29-year-olds. And if you're going Rowell, you're going a youth strategy. You're putting a line through probably anyone 29 plus, because they're not going to be there.
You're not into Billings. You're not into five.
Yeah, once you take them out, all of a sudden, just by saying he's an 80 guy, he's pretty high up on your board if he's going to give you that much service for probably a decade.
Yeah, no, it's true. And for people that already own him in an existing keeper league, probably 18 months ago, you could not pry him from the coach's dead hands. Whereas now it is an opportunity for you to potentially go and buy low. Where previously to get Rowell, it might have cost you merit and another big premium. Whereas now you might be going, man, I could I'm just using Merritt as the illustration, certainly not as a reason to player to target, going, well, I might get something back with Rowell as well as moving out of Merritt. So there's a great opportunity for strategies for coaches there. I think the upside of Rowell is he's got the potential based on junior stats and that 4-game sample size to be the best fantasy player in the game. Without any question, that's within a realm of probability. And he's also, to your point, got that Chris Judd-esque scoring where in Ultimate Footy, AFL Fantasy DreamTeam scoring, where the stat stuffing needs to be rewarded, he could just be Mr. 95 and a really good, reliable guy. Those, I think, are kind of the outcome areas for him. And then in keepers, he's going to go certainly inside the top 50 picks. For most keepers, I agree. I think in the first 25 to 30 probably feels like he might overreach, just given what he's had to navigate. But as everything we get out of the club right now is he's dominating match simulation. He beat up on Tuke Miller, not literally, but in a sense at stoppage practice work. And that's exactly what Suns fans are wanting to hear. It's what Keeper League folks are wanting to hear. And also for those that are playing single season salary cap that go, he's value. You might not need a stepping stone this year if we get enough cows, but if you're looking at a stepping stone in any of the formats through your midfield, Rowell is an absolute one of the best, if not the best, stepping stone midfielder for us in 2022. Hey, Kane, appreciate your work today on this episode as we talked about Matt Rowell.
No problem, MJ.
If you want to go and read the article, there's a bunch more other stuff that we didn't get to in the podcast for you. Go and read and check out now, not just about Matt, but all the other players in the 50 most relevant. You can check it out at coachespanel.tv. While you're there, you can sign up to our Patreon supporter group. It's one of the ways you can get involved in some exclusive access and as a way of saying thanks to the Coaches Panel for the content. Hopefully you're enjoying this preseason. Tomorrow, we get to the number 28 of the 50 most relevant, a player that in keeper leagues, you're certainly considering inside the top 20 picks. He's a young gun. He's broken out. But can he go from being a really good 100 player to being one of the next big Uber premiums across all of the formats? I think it's just a matter of time before he does it. Who is he? And is 2022 his season? We'll talk about that tomorrow in the 50 Most Relevant.